Hey, Chad here with LearnMixedReality.com. Welcome back to the tutorial series we're doing here. Doing a full game that runs on the Windows Mixed Reality devices. And here we are in session number 5, where we're going to be added in scoring. So our core logic that we did in the second session actually has scoring built in, but it's really just about an internal score of what it thinks it should be, and obviously each individual game can override that. So let's take a look at that code real quick to remind ourselves of exactly how that works. So if we take a look at check for item, we can see that we're looking at the score is set to the number of items that we're using, which in our case is 3, subtracting from that how many times we've missed. So if we haven't missed any, then the score is going to be 3, because 3 minus 0 is 3, of course. And if we missed 1, then 3 minus 1 is going to be 2. So if you missed one of them, then the score you'll get is 2. And if you miss 2 of them, which means that you didn't guess right at all, so you guessed the first time was wrong, guessed the second time and it wasn't in that one either, and so you finally got it on your third try because there's only 3 options in this example. So 3 minus 2 would be 1. And the score is 1, so we're going to just simply set your strikes and not even pass back a score. Okay, so if you actually made a match and it was either your first or second try, then the score is either going to be 3 or 2. And it's up to the game we can just use those scores, or we can do something different from that if we wanted to. So that's what we're going to work on now. And so we're going to jump over to our game code in our shell game tutorial itself, in our game controller. And in our check for item that we hooked up in the last session, where we hooked up our motion controllers and we did a check for item, where if you push the trigger on the motion controller, or inside Unity we can just tap like an air tap if you're using a HoloLens, then we're going to call that core logic's check for item, and that's the code we're just looking at. And it's going to raise either the match not made event, or it's going to raise the match made event. If it raises the match made event, we're going to get that score back. Okay, so let's take a look at our match made event. So we got core logic match made, and inside of here all we're doing currently is just logging out to the debug window. Hey, match is made, here's the ID of the box we made the match, and here's the score that came back from the core logic, right? Because we actually created our own match event args, and from that we actually get a score object back. So if we wanted to, we could actually create our own score here. And that's what we're going to do. I'm going to come up here to the top and say private int score. And then we'll go back to the match made. And we're going to say, let's see, we'll say score is equal to e.score. So we're going to say, well, plus equal to e.score. So we're going to just add whatever we get back from a core logic, we'll set to the score. So if they get on the first try, then they'll get a score of 3. And if they get on the second try, it'll be a score of 2. And if it's the quote-unquote third try or the last try, this won't even get called. And so there will be no score added if they miss. Now, since we're adding to our score, we need to make sure our score actually has a value associated to it. So when we initialize it up here, when we create it, we just need to go initialize it to 0 at the very beginning. So when our game starts up, our score will just get a starting value of 0. And that way, the very first time, this will work well for us. We'll just simply add 2, 0, 3, or 2, whatever the case might be, and then the score will be there. But that also means that we need to set this back to 0 when we're done with the game. And we've already seen we have a game over event that we've hooked up to in the past. And so all we need to do here under game over is set that score equal to 0. Now what we can also do is let's go on and log out. We'll say game over and then the score, and let's turn this into an actual string we can work with here, and we're going to say the score is that and the number of strikes, and we can pass in the strikes, and we actually have that by going to core logic, and we've already exposed the strikes. So remember, in the core logic, every time we strike out, this strike gets added to, and so right here we'll actually know that we should have 3 strikes at this point. This is actually going to display the score before it gets set to 0, along with how many strikes that we had, and this should be 3 based off of current settings. So let's just look through all the events again and make sure we're on the same page of exactly how this logic is working and how we have it hooked up to the game controller here. So of course, in our awake, we're actually initializing the core logic, passing in the number of items that we have, along with the number of strikes that we're going to say that we're allowing before the game's over. Okay, and so we just have the number of strikes is being passed in, and let's go ahead and just default that to 3. It won't matter for our game, but the number of strikes being passed in from the editor, but by default we might as well just default it to 3, and if the game designer, if we want to change that inside the editor, we can. But that's getting passed into our shell game logic, and that's kind of what we're working with. Is we have the 3 items, the 3 boxes, right? So here in Unity, let's actually get to our table here. Double click on that, and we can see the 3 items that we have, and they're all associated to our game controller. So item 1, 2, and 3 is associated to our game controller, and it's taking a link to those, so it's 3, and that's how that's getting passed in. So that's in the awake. When Unity sees the game controller, that's going to run that code, and then after everything's been called, all the scripts have had their awake call, then Unity is going to call start for each script in different orders. And so in our start, this is where we're going to hook up the actual events and then finally call start turn. So since we're seeing start turn here, all it does is actually call reset items on our core logic. But let's take a look at the actual events that we're looking into. So one is item reset. Then we get the game over. We know when a reset's complete. We know when an item's been selected, when the item's being checked, when a match isn't made, when a match is made, and when we should start our turn. So if we go back over here to the actual core logic, the 2 exposed methods that we have are reset items that we're expecting our game controller to call, and check for item. Okay? When reset items is called, the very first thing we call is that item reset event. So it's kind of like the pre-reset item. So this is a way that when reset items is called, that this event will get called and the game controller can do something with that. And likewise, when reset items is done, when we actually create our random number, we have reset. We've actually called game over if we've hit too many strikes, and we've reset strikes if need be, or at the very least we've reset miss count for this turn. And when we're done with resetting the items, we actually call the reset complete event. Similarly, in our check for item, the very first thing we do is raise the event, hey, we're checking the items, kind of like the so that the game controller can do some logic, knowing that we're about ready to check the item. Maybe that we're about ready to check the item. So maybe some animations, playing a sound, what have you. Then the logic is actually going to do the item check, and it's going to raise the event of, okay, the item has been selected. We selected the right item. Okay. Now, whether we selected the right item on the first try, second try, or third try doesn't matter. It's just selected item has happened, and that event's going to get raised. And then we're going to do our score logic that we just looked at. And if a match was not made, we're going to raise that event. But if a match was made, we'll raise the match made event. And then internally, we're going to call this private function a close items, which is going to set the is already opened flag to false. And the whole point of that, and let's just actually look at that code real quick. So you see this already checked that we have here. We're checking the item because if it's already been checked, then we don't want to add to our miscount. So if somebody selects item 1 and then item 2 and then back to item 1, then it's still just missed twice. Or maybe a better example, they picked item 1 and then they picked item 1 again, then that's still just one miss because they've already selected that one. We're not going to count that against them multiple times. So because of that, we have this already checked flag on our item. And this close item simply loops through them all and sets the already checked to false. Okay, so that's all that's doing. But once it closes the items, then it's going to call start turn because, hey, we're done with this turn. We either made a match or we didn't make a match. Regardless, it's time to start the next turn. So let's jump back over to our game controller code. Let's take a look at when our match is made. And we're saying the score, so that's all good. The on destroy, just to make sure this is clear as well, when you hook up your events, you register for your events, you also need to make sure you clean up after yourself. And so this is the Unity function on destroy, in which case we go through those exact same events that we've hooked up to, and we're going to unregister each event. And remember, in our start turn, when we is called by this event, we're actually going to invoke our own start turn after about a second. For now, we might change this once we put in some different animations in the future. But for right now, we're just going to call start turn when we get that event. So when the core logic says, okay, we're done, you should start another turn, we're going to do that. But for now, instead of just calling start turn, we're going to put a little delay there. So we have it there for when we do animations. Our start turn doesn't do anything really except turns back around and calls the core logic reset items. But we want to do other things like make sure that the P's are covered up. We want to actually hide the P from the container so they can't cheat. We'll be doing that soon. We might want to actually animate the items, so sliding all the containers around and playing animation sounds, right? So this is all stuff we're going to be building up to, and we've already talked about this, but at the same time, I want to make sure that we're still on the same page here. So let's go ahead and go back to Unity, and let's go to our build settings, player settings, and uncheck the virtual reality supported. That way we can just play it here inside of Unity for now. We had that checked when we were doing our motion controllers last session. But since we're just going to be inside of Unity here, we can take a look at the table. So I'm selecting the first one, and we see that I did not make a match. We can select the second one, and we see I also didn't make a match. Now I have 2 misses, which means that now I'm going to have a strike. I'll make this one. You can see that I selected item 2, and now no match is made, and I actually got a strike on that one. We called start turn. Start turn called the core logic's reset item, which actually then called our event item reset. Once it was done, it called our event reset complete. So at this point, our score is still going to be 0. Now, I got it on the right try that time. On the very first one, I selected the item 0, and we got a match was made, and the score that came back was 3. So our overall score should be 3 now. And in fact, just to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to stop this instead of me having to try to count this stuff in my head. Let's go back to our scoring. And instead of just also printing out the score that we got from the core logic, we'll also print out total score. And that'll be our score that we're keeping track of. All right, so let's go back to Unity. We'll hit play. All right, and so we didn't get it right that time. And we didn't get it right that time, so we didn't get anything at all. So our score is still 0. Nothing's changed. We didn't get it right that time. Trying the second one. We didn't get it right that time. Third one. So now that's our second strike. And we still have 0 score. Let's go to the first one. And we missed. The second one, hey, we got it. Is our second try, so now we have a score of 2. We've got our first score, and our score's 2, our total score's 2. And then we're ready to try again. I'm going to try the middle one. I missed. Try the first one. And we got it. So second try, got a score of 2, so our total score now is 4. And so we can see our score logic is working, which shouldn't be a huge surprise here. Got on the first try that time, a score of 3, so it added 4 and 3, we got 7. Okay, so let's just, I'm going to keep on going until the game's over. Just to make sure our score gets reset back to 0. So there we go, game over, score 7, strikes are 3. So I'm going to start again, and we can see the score was 3 and our total score is 3. So our score got reset to 0 and then set to added 3 to 0. So that logic is all working as we would expect. So that is really good. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this and clear the console. Well, that's where we'll wrap up this session by actually implementing the scoring and reiterating how the events are working from the core logic and how our game controller is hooking into those and how we're very easily able to set our scoring up. So by having this core logic separated out, we can make multiple games if we wanted to and have just different game controllers that works a little bit differently, does different scoring. So if you, obviously we can say, if the score is 3, if E scores 3, then add 10 to score, for example. And if E scores 2, then add 5 to score, or whatever we want to have, or 0. So the only time they get a score is if they actually get on the first try, and maybe strikes is 10 or something. Like, the point is the core logic is doing its own internal scoring, and it's passing that in here, and we can, if we just want to leave the scoring, then we just simply set that value here. But we can do totally different logic here if we wanted to. Now in the next session, what we're going to do is link up the game components to the logic. For example, we're actually going to hide all the P's that are in there, because right now the P's are still visible, and somebody could just look in here and you'd see all the P's, and that's not really what we want. And we'll show, hide all the P's, we'll show all the boxes, and when we actually check an item, when we actually tap on that, we'll remove the box, and if the P is there, then it'll be a visual indication that we actually selected instead of only having to rely on what's in the console. So that's what we're going to do in the next session. Hope you'll join me for that. And if you're enjoying this tutorial series, by all means, let me know by hitting that like button. If you're not liking it, you can hit that dislike button and let me know. If you're not subscribed and you want to make sure that you are notified about the next session when it's available, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So I hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll see you in the next video.